A classic display of psychological manipulation. When an overqualified analyst uncovers a $500,000 ghost company fraud, the crime boss doesn't silence her. He isolates and absorbs her into his operation. Dante Morelli exhibits fascinating behavioral control. He uses fear and high-stakes tests to condition Lila, forcing her to untangle a web of narcotics and stolen goods. From a clinical standpoint, Lila's transition from a desperate job seeker to a complicit operator is a masterclass in psychological grooming. He gives her the power to fix his chaotic world, creating a lethal codependency masked as corporate loyalty.
So their story doesn't start with a hello, it kicks off with a crash, the sound that marked Lila Bennett's very first day. In that one insane moment, she became the wild card in Dante Morelli's world, a guy who fires people for a single typo. But instead of going ballistic, he gets this dark, curious look. A simple accident with some coffee and a few broken antiques ignites a seriously toxic partnership in the city's power games. This is what happens when pure chaos meets absolute control, and it's destined to either forge an unbreakable alliance or just burn everything to the ground. The trip up to the 47th floor of Morelli Tower was basically a journey into pure panic for Lila. She was clutching her beat-up portfolio like a shield, trying to ignore the warped reflection of a total fraud in the elevator's steel walls. The professional image she'd tried so hard to build was cracking, with stray blonde hairs staging a jailbreak. A tiny coffee stain on her navy dress felt like a massive, glowing failure she couldn't hide. She actually whispered at her reflection, "You're fine." The logical part of her brain was trying to take over. Look, this is a basic gig. An assistant. You answer calls, file stuff, do some easy math. You've handled way crazier things. The elevator chimed and the doors opened onto a space so sterile it felt like it would kill a houseplant on sight. The whole vibe was black, white, and chrome on polished marble. The furniture looked like it was designed to be as uncomfortable as possible. And behind a crazy modern desk sat a woman whose hairstyle looked like the source of a permanent migraine. She glanced up. "You're late," the woman deadpanned, skipping all greetings. Lila glanced at her watch. "I'm actually 7 minutes early." "Mr. Morelli's appointments need to be 15 minutes ahead of schedule. You are late." The woman's eyes were just flat, lifeless discs. "Your name?" "Lila Bennett. I have a 9 a.m. appointment." "I'm aware of why you are here." She stood up with a threatening vibe, a tall, bony woman in a black suit that probably cost more than Lila's rent. "Follow me. Don't touch a single thing, and do not speak unless Mr. Morelli speaks to you first. And keep your eyes down until he says otherwise. For your own good, don't waste his time." Lila tried to compute all the commands. "Is this an interview or an interrogation?" The woman's face was a total stone mask. "With Mr. Morelli, they're pretty much the same thing." They walked down a hall with art that was either priceless or a very expensive joke. The carpet was so thick her feet sank into it. A heavy, terrified silence seeped from behind the closed doors, the sound of people afraid to even breathe too loud. "Sorry," Lila said, trying to cut the tension. "I didn't get your name." "I didn't offer it?" The woman stopped cold in front of 2 huge, dark wooden doors with chrome handles. "This is his office. He's on a call. When that light turns green, you can go in. Not 1 second before. And if the light stays red, then you will keep on waiting." "For how long?" The woman's glare made it clear this was a stupid question. "Until it's green, or until Mr. Morelli decides your appointment is canceled, whichever happens first." And with that, she turned, her heels clicking away like a time bomb, leaving Lila alone with a sinister red light. The time was exactly 9 a.m. punctual for a normal human, but in this psycho world, she was already failing. The minutes crawled by, that red light staring like an unblinking eye. A voice came through the door. It was deep, controlled, and radiated the kind of authority that doesn't need to yell. The words were muffled, but the tone was final, like someone announcing the laws of physics. It wasn't angry or calm. It was just the sound of pure fact. A sharp pain started in Lila's feet. The heels she'd borrowed were half a size too small. A last-minute swap after her own fell down a grate. She shifted her weight again, the portfolio now feeling like it weighed a ton. She put it on the floor, then immediately snatched it back, paranoid that even setting something down was a fireable offense. The light flashed green. Lila grabbed the handle and pushed. The huge door didn't budge. She pushed harder. Still, zip. It was a pull door. A dumb, classic mistake. She yanked it open, and the momentum sent her stumbling into the room. Her heel caught on the carpet, and she was launched forward like she'd been shoved, her portfolio flying from her hands. Its contents exploded across the floor, resumes and spreadsheets scattering like trash in the wind. Lila's body then connected with something solid with a sickeningly loud crack. A whole mess of sensations hit her. The sound of shattering porcelain, the smell of old books and crazy expensive cologne, and then total silence. She was on her hands and knees in the middle of the sparkly remains of a vase. It was obviously a museum-level piece, blue and white, its ancient history now just expensive garbage. "No," Lila whispered. "This can't be real. Get up!" That voice came from behind a desk the size of a small car. It was the same one from the hall, but sharper now, and scarily, unbelievably calm. Lila scrambled to her feet, moving awkwardly on shaky legs in her terrible shoes. She got her balance back just in time to step on her own resume. The slick paper went out from under her like ice. She windmilled her arms, grabbing for a bookshelf. Her hand smacked a small sculpture, which fell and snapped in two. "Do not move," the voice commanded. Lila froze, her heart hammering. In 15 seconds, she'd done thousands of dollars in damage. "I am so incredibly sorry," she stammered. "I'll pay for it. I don't know how, but I'll figure it out. I can get a second job. I will." "Look at me," Lila did, looking up from the crater she'd made. Dante Morelli was just watching her, completely still, like a predator deciding if a new animal is a threat or just entertainment. He was younger than she expected, maybe in his mid-30s, with dark, intense hair and a face that looked like it was carved from rock. He was in a perfect black suit with no tie, and the open top button somehow seemed more threatening than a formal suit. His eyes were a deep, endless dark that seemed to just eat light. He wasn't sizing her up as a person, but as a weird problem he had to solve. "You are Lila Bennett," he said. It was a statement, not a question. "Yes." Her voice was a pathetic whisper. I was here for the interview. I am so sorry about that vase. It was a 14th century piece from the Ming Dynasty, valued at roughly $80,000. All the color drained from Lila's face as pure shock hit her. I will set up payments." It was also a replica. He tilted his head. "The real one is stored elsewhere. This office gets too much traffic for genuine antiques." She just stared, her brain short-circuiting from the whiplash. "So I didn't just smash—" "You smashed a $1,500 reproduction, a major, careless loss, but not a total disaster." He stood up, and he was so tall he seemed to make the room smaller. The sculpture you broke, however, was authentic, 18th century ivory. You will be paying me for that. Lila's eyes dropped to the second pile of rubble at her feet. How much is that worth? That completely depends on whether you survive the next 10 minutes. He started walking around the desk with the smooth grace of a hunter. Tell me, Miss Bennet, is destroying property a hobby of yours, or am I just seeing a special performance? This is a really, really bad day for me, she said, knowing how pathetic it sounded. I promise you I'm competent. I'm organized. I am. His voice cut right through her excuse. You are standing in the wreckage of porcelain and your own career. He got closer, and she could see a thin scar next to his left eyebrow. Your shoes don't fit. Your dress is stained. Your portfolio looks like it's held together with hope and a broken zipper. Every single page has a water stain from a glass. A hot blush exploded on Lila's cheeks. There are reasons for all of that. Do not voice them. He knelt down, a move that put him at her eye level and was way more terrifying than him towering over her, and picked up a resume from the floor. He read it in complete silence. His brain cataloged her life. A math degree from Columbia, full scholarship, graduated at the top of her class. 3 years as a financial analyst at Meridian Hecht before it spectacularly crashed and burned. His eyes bored into hers. You're overqualified for half my management team. Why do you want an assistant job? Because I need to be employed, Lila said, her honesty brutal and direct. And no company will touch someone from a firm that got indicted for fraud, even though I was innocent. You were in their accounting department. Data analysis, I was the one who found the errors, I reported them. The FBI then found way bigger crimes and the whole company fell apart. She met his gaze with the guts of someone who had nothing left to lose. I did the right thing and it cost me everything. Now I'm rebuilding, apparently by taking apart your office. So get this, Dante's entire vibe shifts. Not like he's going soft, dude's made of stone, but like a supercomputer just confirmed its biggest theory. He nails her to the wall. You're the chick who blew the whistle on the fraud. Yup. Even though you knew it would nuke your own career. I did it because people were about to lose their life savings. Layla shoots back, her voice shaking. I never thought the whole company would go down in flames. I figured they'd fix it. I was dead wrong. Dante stands up, holding her file. And now you're broke, blacklisted, and desperate enough to come to me. I did my research on your company, she counters. The Morelli Empire is an absolute unit, 17 subsidiaries and 6 commercial holdings, a history of insane growth and perfect financials. Your public image is spotless, Layla says. Dante's quiet reply, dripping with irony, basically says, yeah, maybe it was once. I need a job, she insists. My skills are legit. I'm fast, I'm precise, and I stay in my lane. A claim he immediately dunks on. Funny you say that after grilling my receptionist. I just asked for her name. A name she didn't give because her job isn't to be your friend. He walks back to his desk, stepping around broken ceramic like a Terminator. In the last 2 years, I've burned through 4 assistants, he says. The first one vanished after 3 days. The second had a complete meltdown inside a week. The third broke my rule about being on time. The fourth tried to rip me off. And what happened to them? The first 3 got new gigs. The fourth, Well, the fourth is no longer a problem. He gestures to the empty chair across from him. Sit. Layla eyes the chair, then the battlefield of broken porcelain between them. She picks her way through the mess without touching a single piece before sitting. The chair sucks, just like she expected. Dante pulls out a skinny file. I'm gonna ask you 3 questions. Give me straight answers. I even think you're lying. This meeting is over and your career in this city is finished. Clear? Layla's mouth goes bone dry. It is. First question, why are you really here? Like I said, I need a job, right? But you've already applied to 43 other companies in the last 6 months. I know because I ran a full background check on you yesterday. He leans back. 37 of those were for jobs like your old one. 5 were lateral moves. This is the only one that's a massive step down. I'll ask again, why my firm? Layla takes a deep breath. The raw truth, or some story he'll see right through. She knew he could smell a lie a mile away. Because every other company sees my resume and labels me incompetent or a criminal, she says. That fraud scandal made me toxic. Your company, though, is famous for picking up assets other people have thrown away. You employ 3 execs from tanked corporations and a woman who got fired from 6 jobs. That means you're either a saint or you just don't play by the normal rules. Or maybe I just care about talent more than a perfect track record. That's possible, Layla admits, holding his gaze. My theory is you judge people by how useful they are, not by their old boss's screw-ups. A long, tense silence fills the room before Dante speaks. Second question, what was the real reason Moretti and Hecht went under? The fraud investigation. That's the newspaper version. I want the real story. Layla hesitates, feeling a trap being set. The fraud was real, she begins, picking her words carefully. But it wasn't the whole picture. Moretti was drowning in debt to grow the company. The asset freeze from the investigation was the final nail in the coffin. It started a domino effect. Clients ran, lenders wanted their money back, and the whole show fell apart in 3 weeks. The fraud was just the match that lit the fuse. And you saw this coming. That wasn't a question, it was a statement. But Layla answered anyway. I saw the pattern 6 months before the collapse. I told my bosses, they ignored me. Why? I was a 26-year-old woman telling a bunch of old dudes their entire business plan was garbage. They said I was being dramatic. A bitter edge creeps into her voice. They were wrong. I was right. Reality didn't care what they thought. Dante picks up a pen and clicks it once. The sound is like a gunshot in the silent room. Third question, if I hire you and you find a problem in my books, what's your move? Layla knew this was the real test. I'd bring it straight to you, she replies, and I'd help you fix it. You wouldn't call the authorities? Only if you gave the direct order. Layla leans in. I learned a hard lesson at Moretti. Going over the chain of command solves nothing. It just creates chaos. My job is to protect your interests. Not the FBI's, not the SEC's, but yours. Is that loyalty or just flexible morals? It's pragmatism, Layla snaps back. You can't fix a system from the outside. Real change comes from earning trust on the inside. Dante clicks the pen again, then a third time. He sets it on the desk, perfectly parallel to his notepad. You start Monday, he says. 0800. The time was non-negotiable. Not 8:15, not a minute early. 0800. A knot of pure stress inside Layla finally starts to loosen. Thank you, I promise you. Your pay is $60,000 a year. Benefits kick in after 90 days. You report only to me, which means you'll work longer hours than anyone else and handle risky data. You will keep my business absolutely confidential. You will not ask questions about things that aren't your business, and you will not break any more of my stuff. Understood. You're going to sign an NDA so brutal your own lawyer would tell you to run. You'll sign it anyway because you need this job more than you need protection. He stands up. That ivory sculpture you smashed is worth $4,000. It'll be deducted from your first 3 paychecks. The vase was my mistake. Putting a fake at the main hallway was bad planning. That debt is wiped. Layla also gets to her feet, trying to hide the massive wave of relief washing over her. Thank you, Mr. Moretti. Save it. You haven't even survived one day here yet. He walks to the door and opens it. Claire will send over the contracts. Read every word. Don't sign until you're absolutely sure. Claire? The receptionist, the one whose name you wanted. Of course. Layla kneels to grab her scattered papers, trying to keep her cool. She manages to shove her papers back into her portfolio, using both hands to hold the broken zipper closed. At the door, Dante's voice stops her cold. Ms. Bennett. She turns around. It wasn't your resume or your obvious desperation that got you this job, he says. It was your decision to expose the Moretti fraud, knowing it would blow up your own life. That kind of guts is rare. It's a quality I need. Totally speechless, Layla just gives him one sharp nod and leaves. The weekend became a blur of intense, focused prep, like she was building armor for a war. She bought new shoes, serious, no-nonsense heels, and 2 more dresses, both flawless. She read every single one of the 47 pages of the non-disclosure agreement from Claire and signed it. Dante had read her like a book. Her need for the job was way bigger than any need for legal safety. Monday came with a downpour. At 7:45, Layla stood under Moretti Tower, her umbrella already wrecked by the wind, the building itself looking like a monument to raw power. Inside, the lobby was a cold tomb of marble and steel, with guards who checked her, ID like they were protecting Fort Knox. She stepped onto the 47th floor at 7:58. Claire was already there, rocking the same hostile expression from the interview. Her eyes flicked from Layla to her computer clock. You're early. I thought early was on time here. Early is allowed. On time is mandatory. Late is unacceptable. Claire slides a key card and a thin file at her. Your desk is the cubby next to Mr. Moretti's office. You can only go to this floor, the exec floor on 46, and the document vault on 42. Any other floor requires his written permission. Your login info is in here. Change the password immediately. Mr. Morelli gets here at 800 hours. He needs coffee, black, no sugar, between 180 and 185 degrees, on his desk by 8:01. Not a second before, not a second after. How can I make sure? Claire points to a door marked Executive Break Room. There's a thermometer in the drawer by the coffee maker. Use it. With the file and keycard in hand, Layla stepped into what looked less like a break room and more like a showroom for crazy expensive gear. The coffee maker was straight out of a sci-fi movie. She grabbed a digital thermometer, brewed the coffee with surgical precision, and set it on Dante's desk at exactly 8:01. His office was empty. Lila put the cup down, careful not to breathe on the priceless artifacts, and went back to her spot. Her little corner, while small, was decked out for maximum efficiency. The monitor had a sick view of the city, which must have cost a fortune. A beast of a computer, a complex phone, and a stack of must-do-now files were waiting for her. Layla got straight to work, logging in to pull up the first file. It was a shipping list for a Morelli side hustle, full of what looked like boring logistics info. But when she checked it against the company's asset list, something was off. A shipment of textiles that was supposed to be 500 units was logged as 487. The difference was noted but not explained. Layla dug up another list from the same department from a different quarter and found a similar shortage of 13 units. Just as she started mapping out this sketchy pattern, a voice cut through the silence. "You've been here 20 minutes and you're already hunting for skeletons in the closet." For a split second, her poker face cracked. Dante was standing in the doorway, holding the coffee she made, his expression cold and analytical. Layla explained she was just looking at his priority files. He shot that down fast. Those files were a 6-month-old test, not a priority. He sipped the coffee. 184 degrees, perfect. "Did you measure it?" "I measure everything." He walked over to her desk, his eyes glued to her screen. "What did you find?" "A slow bleed, small, consistent inventory losses from Arcadia Textiles, a pattern that screamed either a system bug or a calculated ripoff." "Which one is it?" "A glitch would be chaotic," she argued, "not this clean, methodical pattern. Somebody was skimming off the top, betting the small amounts would be written off as accounting mistakes." Dante set his cup down with purpose, put a price on the damage. Layla already had the number, about $32,000 wholesale over the last 6 months. And the thief? To nail the guy, she said, she'd need personnel and shipping data. The profile pointed to a warehouse worker with access to edit the logs. "You have been here for 20 minutes, Dante repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "My predecessor stared at the same data for 6 months and saw nothing." "Maybe," Layla shot back. She wasn't looking for trouble. "She was ordered to," he said, picking up his coffee. "The difference is skill. She didn't have it. You do." A wave of pride hit Layla, which was instantly frozen by a dark thought. "You already knew about this for 8 months," he confirmed. "This was a test to see how fast you operate. That is..." Layla bit back the word that would get her fired. "Incredibly thorough. I don't hire people I haven't tested, and I sure as hell don't give out unearned trust." He started walking to his office, but then paused. "Fix the Arcadia problem. Keep it quiet. The thief has no idea we're onto him until I decide what to do with him. What's the protocol I should..." "Your brain found the cancer. It can figure out the cure." The door clicked shut, leaving Layla in total silence. She whipped around to her screen, pulling up employee files, shipping lists, and warehouse access logs. After 3 hours of deep diving the data, a name popped up. Marcus Renton, a supervisor with 6 years on the job and keys to the whole kingdom. His method was slick. Changed the shipment numbers after the trucks were loaded, but before the paperwork was filed, burying the theft in the data noise. Layla typed up a quick report with all the proof and dropped it on Dante's desk. When he got back, he read it without a word, then called her in. "How sure are you? Unless someone pulled off an insanely complicated frame job, the numbers don't lie." "Your recommendation?" Layla hesitated. "Fire him and call the cops." "Why? He's stealing from you." He's taken $32,000 in 6 months. That's about $5,000 a month. Do you have any idea what my monthly coffee bill is for this office? I'm guessing it's more than $5,000. A lot more. So I'll ask again. Why does this matter? Lila shifted her entire mindset. The problem wasn't the cash, it was the infection. Letting it slide would just make it spread. Better, Dante said, leaning back. Go on. If he's got a buyer, he's got an outside contact. That means there's a hole in our supply chain, a weakness someone could use to do way more damage. That's the right answer, Dante confirmed, getting up. Marcus Renton is a nobody. The weak link in my system that let him operate for 8 months is what I care about. Fix the system. My plan: a 3-point verification system, random cargo checks, and requiring 2 people to sign off on any manifest changes. Build a system where being honest is the easiest option. He walked to the window. Then you'll fire Renton. No cops, no scene, I'll handle the rest. A chill ran down Layla's spine. What does handle the rest mean? Dante turned to face her. It means you stop asking questions when you're not ready for the answers. An argument died on her tongue as she remembered how she ended up here. My job is to help you. I'll get the new protocols running immediately. Excellent, he said, returning to his desk. And Miss Bennett, yes? Stop thinking about Marcus Renton. He's about to become a non-issue. Layla walked out, trying to shove down the terrifying images flooding her mind. The next few weeks were a brutal grind, swinging between insane efficiency and a constant sense of dread. Layla would clock in at 7:55 to make Dante's coffee at the perfect temperature. Her job was a wild mix of boring admin work and mind-bending financial puzzles meant to push her to her absolute limit. Dante's standards were insane and non-negotiable. He didn't just want tasks done, he wanted them done perfectly inside scenarios he cooked up, forcing her to dig up secret data or guess his next move, only to chew her out for not being a mind reader. Still, there were tiny wins, a sharp nod at her work, which she learned was his version of a standing ovation. Sometimes he'd ask for her professional take and actually seemed to consider it. She'd catch him watching her sometimes, his face a total blank, giving away nothing. The office itself was a pressure cooker. People moved like ghosts, their conversations all whispers and side eyes. Layla heard stories about Dante. From believable to totally legendary, one painted him as a self-made titan forged in fire. Another rumor claimed he was the heir to a dynasty, started by an even more ruthless father. The only thing everyone knew for sure was that crossing him was career suicide, with whispers of much worse. Layla walled off these stories, banking on her own skills to protect her. She fixed broken systems, streamlined workflows, and snuffed out problems before they blew up. She started to predict his needs, read the tiny shifts in his mood, and master his brand of organized chaos. Then, 6 weeks in, she found something. It was almost 8 p.m. The floor was a ghost town. Dante was still stuck in a meeting, giving Layla a chance to look into some flagged expenses. The reports looked basic: travel, schmoozing clients, company purchases. But one entry just felt wrong. Meridian Holdings had billed them $127,000 for consulting. Not a huge red flag on its own. But when Layla checked Meridian's payment history, things got weird. The money was routed to Apex Advisory Group, a company so new or so small it didn't show up in any business database. Digging deeper got her nowhere. Apex Advisory Group was a ghost company with no official registration, no tax records, nothing. It wasn't real. Her heart started hammering. This was either a massive screw-up or some deep-level corruption. She pulled more files from Meridian. 3 more payments to Apex popped up from the last 6 months, from $100,000 to $150,000. Over $500,000 had just vanished into a shell corporation. Meridian's other books were spotless. These 4 payments were like giant festering wounds on a perfect record. Lila was frozen, staring at the screen. Lila saw the system's disease with terrifying clarity. The cash being funneled through Meridian meant there was a traitor in the ranks or something rotten in the whole company. If Dante, the kingpin himself, was part of it, then finding this just signed her death warrant. The smart move was to back away, but something pushed her to dig deeper. She started a full-blown audit of Meridian's shipping records, its entire logistics arm. A disgusting pattern of corruption emerged. Fake inventories, nonsensical shipping routes, and supposedly closed warehouses that were clearly active. Calling this just fraud felt like a massive understatement. An icy dread gripped her. Just then, Dante appeared at the doorway, looking more exhausted than she'd ever seen him. He asked, "Find anything interesting?" And in that moment, her entire future hung in the balance. This conversation would define their relationship from here on out. Lying was the safe play, but telling the truth was a gamble that could expose the real monster behind the mask. Layla chose to gamble, spinning her monitor towards him, the damning evidence glowing in the dark room. So check this out. Lila drops a bombshell on her boss, reporting that over $500,000 vanished into a ghost company in just 6 months, and without bank access, the trail goes cold. Dante rolls up to her desk, stone-faced, soaking it all in. He asks for her theory, his voice way too calm. Lila lays it out cold. It's either someone stealing from the inside or a full-blown money laundering op. Or it's your secret project, which makes me a huge problem. The silence is deafening before Dante just slams the folder shut. "Go home, Ms. Bennett," he says, with zero menace but a ton of controlled power. "We'll deal with this tomorrow." Layla grabs her stuff and bolts, feeling his eyes glued to her back until the office door clicks shut. She doesn't sleep a wink. She shows up at 7:30 the next morning, totally ready to be fired. Keycard denied. Access revoked. But weirdly, everything is completely normal. The elevator zips up to the 47th floor. Her computer logs in fine. Then she sees it. A sliver of light from under Dante's door. She goes through the motions, making his coffee just right, even checking the temperature twice before knocking at exactly 8:01. Enter. There's Dante, a silhouette against the window, just staring at the city like a king. He doesn't move. "Leave it on the desk," he says. But just as Layla turns to leave, his voice cuts in. "Stay!" She freezes, every nerve in her body screaming danger. Dante finally faces her, and the exhaustion on his face just makes his powerful vibe even more intense. "Give me the report," he orders. Layla rattles off the data again, her voice as flat as last night's discovery. Fishy transfers to a shell company more than $500,000 in 6 months. Warehouse logistics are a mess. My take? Either you're running this whole thing or you're totally in the dark. If it's the first one, I need to know where I stand. Dante just takes a sip of his coffee, placing the cup back down like it's a chess piece. The air in the room is electric, like everything is an extension of his power. "Sit," he says, pointing to the same chair from her first interview. "What do you know about my family?" Dante asks. Your father started Morelli Enterprises 30 years ago, after he died 8 years back. You took over and expanded. Dante cuts her off, his voice flat. My father didn't start a business. He inherited a kingdom. My grandfather built an empire that terrified people. My father was just the heir. When my father died, the whole operation was split between me and my brother. A chill runs straight down Lila's spine. What kind of operations? She asks. You're sharp enough to figure it out. I'm not going to spell it out for you. It clicks. Your family is into organized crime. Is, Dante confirms, his eyes locked on hers. Right now. But we're trying to change. Some of our businesses are legit. Others are being cleaned up. Meridian, unfortunately, is still doing its old job. You're washing money. I'm managing a sinful legacy. There's a difference. He starts fiddling with a pen, a small, controlled movement. After my dad died, I had 2 choices. Let the whole empire collapse or grab the reins and try to build something legitimate to protect everyone who depends on me. I picked the second option. So why are you telling me this? Because what you found makes you one of 2 things, a liability or a tool. I'm giving you the chance to pick which one you want to be. Her mouth goes totally dry. And my choice is to just walk away? You'd sign a rock-solid NDA, get a huge payout, and get blacklisted in this town. You'd be a security risk. That's not a choice, she says. I know, Dante agrees. It isn't. But it's a courtesy my father or grandfather never would have offered. Lila looks at the guy who gave her a purpose when she had none. He's offering her a part in a world that could swallow her whole, or a key role in a dangerous, illegal, and massive transformation. What would my job be? She hears herself ask. Dante's eyes shift, not with relief, but with something dangerously close to it. Your job now, but way bigger. You'll find the disease in this company and help me create the cure. You're going to help me make this whole thing legit before the rot takes us all down. That's way above an admin assistant's pay grade. You've been my forensic accountant and ops analyst since day 1. I just didn't give you the title. And stuff like Meridian? You bring it to me, only me, and together, we'll figure out how to cut out the cancer without killing the patient. I'll be an open book with you, but your morals are your own problem. You need to decide if you're all in. Layla thinks about all the times doing the right thing got her screwed. At 27, she's weighing her dead-end career against this insane gamble. I need total access to all the financials, she demands, not just the clean books. To fix this, I need to see how bad the infection is. Done. And I need your word that going legit is the real goal, not just a cover for more crime. Dante stands up, walks around his desk, and holds out his hand. You have my word. In my world, that's a blood oath. Layla shakes it. His grip is firm, holding on a second too long, sealing a deal that feels way bigger than just business. Welcome to the inner circle, Ms. Bennett, he says. Try not to break anything. In the next few weeks, Layla finds out Dante's world is a crazier maze than she could have dreamed. She gets access to encrypted files and secret ledgers that show an organization in a slow, painful rebirth. Some parts of the business were totally clean, doing exactly what they said on the tin. Others were in transition, their cash flows being rerouted and old ties cut. And then there were places like Meridian. Layla's life became a rat's nest of tracing money. figuring out what could be saved and what had to be burned. It was like untangling a giant knot while someone kept adding more string. Shockingly, Dante was always there. She thought he'd just give orders. But nope, he was right there with her, tearing through files like a partner, not a boss. This warehouse in Brooklyn? Layla points out one afternoon, motioning to her screen. It's listed as a Meridian storage facility, but its power usage is all over the place. It's pulling way too much juice for a normal warehouse. Dante leans in to get a better look. He's so close she can smell his cologne, some fancy French brand she wouldn't even try to pronounce. "What do you think it's being used for?" he asks. Either it's full of off-the-books gear, or it's being used for something power-hungry, a grow house maybe, or some kind of factory. Neither. It's a casino. Poker, sports betting, and some loan sharking on the side. Dante leans back. "It's my uncle's operation. He's been running it for 20 years. "Your uncle?" "My father's brother. He has no interest in going legit, and he's got enough power in the family that trying to force him out would start a war. I can't win right now." Layla starts pulling up more files. "How much does that place make a year?" "About 2 million, almost all of it off the books." "And you just let it run?" "I'm picking my fights. The gambling is small enough to stay off the Fed's radar. My uncle keeps it low-key and isn't greedy." "It's a risk, but it's a managed one. I've got way bigger fish to fry first." "Like what?" Dante gets up and walks to the window, a classic move when he's thinking, like the skyline helps him sort his thoughts. "Like, my father made deals with guys who don't care that he's gone, or suppliers leaning on me to move product I want nothing to do with, or the fact that if I cut certain people off, I'll have such a target on my back that running a legal business would be impossible." "What kind of products?" He turns back to her. "Are you sure you want to know?" Layla thinks for a second. "Yes." "Mostly stolen goods, high-end electronics, jewelry, fine art, stuff that hits the port and disappears before customs can log it. My father had deals with the thieves, and they expect me to keep the business going." "Do you?" "For now. I've been slowly backing away, buying less, moving less, creating distance, but it's a delicate and dangerous game. These aren't the kind of people who take no for an answer." Layla turns back to her screen, pulling up shipping manifests. "Walk me through the operation. I'll see if I can find a way to make the decline look like it's just the market's fault." "Frame it like a business move, not an order from me." Back at her desk, Dante spent the next 2 hours giving her a crash course in the dirty side of his empire. He laid it all out. No shame, no excuses, just the raw deal he was born into and was now trying to tear down. By the time he was done, Layla's head was spinning. She finally got why he looked so damn tired when she first brought up the Meridian problem. "This is gonna take years," she said flatly. "I'm aware, and there's no guarantee it'll even work. One of these alliances crumbles and the whole house of cards comes down." "I know that too." Dante watched her. "So does this change your mind?" "About helping you?" Layla shook her head. "Nah, but our game plan needs to be way smarter. We gotta punch the gas in some areas and hit the brakes in others. We need to rank things by risk, not by how much cash they bring in." "And what's at the top of your hit list?" Layla fired up a new spreadsheet and started mapping it out. "First, any job involving violence or exploitation is dead on arrival. I don't care how profitable it is. We can't talk about going legit while getting rich off human misery. Second, any racket the cops are already watching. Those are just time bombs. Third, high-risk, low-profit gigs that are just stupid to keep. We'll cut out the garbage piece by piece, swapping it with clean businesses as we go. Dante just watched her orchestrate the whole thing, his face a total blank when she looked up. "What?" she asked. "You literally just got recruited into organized crime, and your first move is to blueprint its ethical takedown. You're the one who said you wanted out. That's a goal built on principles. Most people in your spot would be looking for ways to line their own pockets from this. I'm not most people. Lila saved the file, and if I was after dirty money, I would have kept my mouth shut about the Morrison scam." "No," Dante admitted quietly. "You definitely wouldn't have." He left her office, but by the next morning, Layla's paycheck was $30,000 fatter, and her title was now Director of Financial Operations. The job sucked her in with a ferocity she hadn't felt since her early days at Morrison. Here she was solving puzzles with real stakes, working for a guy who saw her as an equal, not some subordinate. The hours were brutal. 12 to 14-hour days became her new reality, but she never complained. She was in her element. This was what she was built for. And Dante, for all his walls and quiet intensity, was becoming something more than just a boss. She saw it in the small things, like the coffee he'd bring her when he knew she'd been buried in spreadsheets for way too long, or the way he'd ask her opinion on stuff that had nothing to do with work, books, music, the hype over some new restaurant on Fifth Avenue, or how sometimes he'd just pull up a chair in her office and work without a word. Like just being there was a comfort. She saw it in his eyes when he thought she wasn't looking, a gaze that was part curiosity and part something that felt a lot like care. 3 months into the job, Layla was deep in a late-night analysis of shipping routes when Dante appeared in her doorway with 2 glasses and a bottle of whiskey worth more than her first car. "It's time for a break," he announced. "I'm almost done with this." "You've been almost done for the last 3 hours. It's time." Layla saved her work and accepted the glass. The whiskey was smooth and warm, with a hint of smoke and honey. "What are we toasting to?" she asked. "To progress. We took care of the first priority 1 target today, the port-import gig. That wasn't scheduled until next month." "I moved it up. You were right. The heat was too much." Dante sat in the chair across from her. "The guys involved weren't happy, but they'll get over it." "How unhappy are we talking?" "Unhappy enough that I've put a security detail on you for the next 2 weeks. Layla set her glass down. "I'm sorry, what?" "The people we just took offline know you're the analyst who put the red flag on their operation. They won't pull anything stupid, but I'm not gambling with your safety. Did it ever cross your mind to maybe run this by me first?" "I'm running it by you now." "After you already did it?" "Exactly." Dante took a sip. "Because if I had asked, you would have said you didn't need protection. I would have disagreed, and we would have wasted a bunch of time on an argument that ends with me doing this anyway." "That is..." Layla stopped, because he was 100% right, and they both knew it. "I don't appreciate being handled like I'm helpless. I'm handling you like you're vital to this organization, and losing you is a risk I won't take. There's a difference." "Is there?" Dante leaned forward. "I've gone through 4 executive assistants in 2 years. 3 of them quit because they couldn't handle the pressure, and one tried to steal from me. You've been here 3 months and have already sniffed out systemic rot that's been poisoning this family for years. You've come up with strategies my own financial crew couldn't even imagine. You've challenged my calls and been right more often than you've been wrong, so, yeah, there's a difference. I need you here, which means I need you safe. Layla picked up her glass again, needing something to do with her hands. I appreciate the sentiment, but I'd still like to be in the loop on these things. Noted. The corner of Dante's mouth twitched up, the closest thing he ever gave to a real smile. I'll try to remember that next time your life's in danger. See that you do. A comfortable silence settled between them, the quiet filled by the taste of expensive liquor as they looked out over the city lights. Can I ask you something? Layla finally said. Depends on the question. You mentioned a brother who was supposed to run this with you. What happened to him? The lines on his face went rigid. He's gone. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. He was killed 5 years ago. Took a bullet in a turf war with a rival crew. Dante's eyes fell to his glass. He was supposed to handle the legit side of things. He was good with people, with deals, with building bridges that weren't based on fear. My job was the other side of that coin. The enforcement, the operations, the stuff that needed a guy who could make the hard calls without flinching. But when he died, you got stuck with both jobs. His death meant I inherited a kingdom I was only 50% ready to rule. The part that bleeds, I understood. The part that builds, instead of just holds on, that was his world, not mine. Layla let that sink in. She pictured him, Dante, this man of absolute control and brutal precision, trying to build a clean world using the tools of a violent one. You're doing a better job than you think, she said softly. Am I? You hired me. You're using data and analysis instead of just throwing muscle around. You're cutting up the parts that cause pain, even when they're making money. That's not the move of a man who's failing to build something clean. It's the move of a man who's actually trying. Dante just looked at her for a long, quiet moment. You have more faith in me than I have in myself. Then I guess I'm here to be the counterbalance. A ghost of a smile touched his lips for half a second. Then his phone vibrated, shattering the fragile peace. He glanced at the screen, and whatever he saw wiped his expression clean, leaving only stone. I have to go, he said, standing up. Don't stay too late. Where are you headed? To a meeting with someone who's not happy about our recent changes in operation. He set his glass on her desk. My security team will be waiting downstairs when you leave. Don't try to ditch them. The thought never even crossed my mind, Layla lied, a fib they both saw right through. After he was gone, she stayed, finished her whiskey, and tried not to think about him walking into a storm while she was safe inside a glass tower. The next morning, he showed up at the office with scraped knuckles and no explanation. Layla didn't ask, but she noticed the stiff way he moved, how he used his left hand instead of his right to pick up a coffee mug, and the faint bruise creeping along his jaw. She also felt a brand new tension buzzing through the office air. The tension had always been there, but this was a whole new level of fear. It was respect born from violence, like someone challenged the king and got absolutely wrecked for it. What went down last night? She hit up Claire while the boss was busy. Mr. Morelli dropped a master class on the limits of his patience. Claire shot back, glued to her screen. That's all you need to get. Did anyone get seriously hurt? Define seriously in dis. Claire. The veteran finally looked up, a tiny bit of pity in her eyes. You're starting to catch feelings for him. That's a rookie mistake. No, I'm not. Yeah, you are. I've seen 4 other assistants in your spot. The first 3 were scared stiff of him. The 4th thought she could play him. You're the first one who actually sees a man. Claire's voice was a low-key warning. He's a man, sure, but he's also a predator. Never forget which one is really in charge here. Lila went back to her desk, trying to work, but Claire's words were on repeat in her head. That night, after everyone clocked out, Dante called her into his office. We need to talk about Meridian, he said. Lila sat down. What's the problem? I'm killing it. The whole thing. The entire op is way too exposed for chump change. We're gonna liquidate its assets and fold them into the clean side of the business. That's gonna leave a massive hole in your distribution. I'll fill it with legit contracts. It'll take longer, but it's a smarter play than trying to scrub Meridian clean piece by piece. And the timeline for this? End of the month. That gives you 3 weeks to map out how to shift its legal functions and cut every other tie. But he slid a fat folder across the table. Everything you need is in there. Employee files, vendor deals, property leases. Your job is to figure out how to nuke them all without starting a war or getting sued. Layla opened it, and the first page was a tangled mess of handshake deals and shady pacts that would be a nightmare to unravel. This is way more than a 3-week job, she said flat out. I know, just do what you can. I'll handle the rest. When you say you'll handle the rest, I mean I'll handle it in ways you don't need to know about. Dante's tone was made of steel. I know you want in on everything, but some doors in this world are locked for your safety and for mine. Layla felt a comeback forming, but one look at his face told her it was useless. The order was given, and his orders were final. Got it, she said. But if this goes sideways because I didn't have all the info, it's on you. Noted. She grabbed the file, and for the next 2 weeks, she dove headfirst into the mission of dismantling Meridian. Some parts were a cakewalk, like contracts with clear exit clauses or accounts that could be squared away. Others needed a magician's touch, finding legal loopholes, offering just enough cash to make lawsuits go away, and building perfect paper trails. Her nights got longer and longer, usually ending when the cleaning crew showed up. Dante was on the same insane schedule, often popping into her doorway around 9 or 10 p.m. with food, as they kept grinding in this weird, silent partnership. On the last night before the Meridian shut down, he showed up, looking more stressed than she'd ever seen him. We've got a problem, he said, and the words hit Layla's gut like a block of ice. What kind of problem? The kind where somebody blew up our timeline, forcing our enemy's hand. He walked over to her desk. I need you to get out of here right now. What's going on? Something that's not your business. Go home, lock your doors, and don't answer calls from any number you don't recognize. Dante. That's an order, Layla. Hearing her first name from him was so rare it was like a screaming alarm. Some people are not happy with our new business plan, and they decided tonight's the night to complain. I need you somewhere safe while I deal with it. I can help. Not with this, you can't. Not in this fight. He pulled out his phone, typing a quick text. Security's downstairs. They'll take you home and will be posted outside your building until I give the all clear. For how long? As long as it takes. He locked eyes with her, and for a split second she saw something that looked like fear. It was so out of character, it freaked her out more than anything else. Please, for once, just do what I say without arguing. Layla grabbed her stuff and got chauffeured home by security. Sleep was a joke. She just sat on her couch, clutching her phone, waiting for a call that never came. By 2 a.m, she was still wide awake, staring at the blank screen, fighting off the darkest thoughts. At 2:47, it buzzed. "Unknown number," she answered. "Miss Bennett?" It was a man's voice, a stranger with an accent she couldn't place. "Your work had been causing problems for some very important people." "Who is this?" "Someone who thinks you should reconsider who you work for. Mr. Morelli's new plan is messing up a very delicate balance. Your help is making you part of that problem." Layla's grip on the phone got tighter. "If you have an issue with what we're doing, take it up with Dante." "Oh, we are! As a matter of fact, we're doing that right now. We just wanted you to understand that your actions have consequences. Ask yourself if your career is worth the price." The line went dead. Layla was frozen for a second before she dialed Dante. It went straight to voicemail. She tried again, same result. She called the security team that was supposed to be outside. The phone just rang and rang. Grabbing her keys and phone, she ran. The warehouse was in a part of town that got left behind, all busted roads, rusty fences, and the dead, empty eyes of abandoned buildings. Sitting shotgun in Dante's car, a black sedan that looked meaner than any sports car, Layla tried to get her breathing under control. "This is a tactical error," she said again for the 3rd time since they'd left her office. With a sharp nod, Dante's eyes were locked at the wrecked 3-story building in front of them. The showdown, just 3 hours before, had been a masterclass in raw power. He had laid out his plan to Lila, his second-in-command, like it was gospel, shutting down any room for argument. The ride to the Meridian warehouse wasn't presented as an option, but as the only possible outcome. Her coming along was a perfectly engineered submission, built on her fear of the unknown, the telltale sign of a fresh trauma bond. The place looked like a slasher movie set, sparking a deep-seated fear in Lila, making her second-guess why she even agreed. She tried to reason with him. Dante just gave her a single word to shut her up. Then he laid down the codependency creed. Stay close, stay silent, and vanish if crap hits the fan. His clipped repeat of the escape plan basically carved their power dynamic into the air. Lila's obedience, a knee-jerk reaction to the obvious danger, was a done deal. Dante strode into the building with a chilling calmness. Inside the warehouse was a crypt of rust and decay. The sick yellow light from up above made every footstep echo like a death sentence. A guy? Gerald flinched when Mr. Morelli just appeared out of nowhere. Dante's voice was creepily friendly, a weird vibe that sent a chill straight through Layla. He introduced his assistant, casually mentioning her skills in forensic accounting. Gerald's smile was thin as paper, totally failing to hide the panic in his eyes. The accountant, Bennett, had dug up some ghost entries in the books, all leading back to a shell company named Apex Advisory. When he got called out, Gerald recognized the name, trying to pass it off as a logistics company. Dante let the lie hang in the air for a second before smashing it, revealing Apex Advisory was a complete fabrication. This left 2 catastrophic options. Money was being sent to a ghost, or it was being washed. The color drained from Gerald's face, a dead giveaway that his story was falling apart as his voice totally failed him. Dante then laid out his terms. demanding a full report on where the money went and the real reason for the warehouse. When Gerald stalled, Dante's hand slammed the desk, a gunshot of violence that made both Gerald and Lila jump. The man clammed up. Dante revealed he'd known about the scheme for a while. This whole interrogation was just to find out who was pulling the strings. Under that insane pressure, Gerald's defenses crumbled. The whole story came tumbling out, pointing the finger at Victor Raines as the puppet master who made contact 6 months back. The deal was clean. Move a shady product through the network for a 20% cut of the profits. Gerald swore he was clueless about the actual cargo, insisting he just followed orders on where to ship it and where to send the payments. Dante's face was stone, but the name Victor Raines hit his mind like an earthquake, connecting this betrayal to a much older war. Gerald's hands were shaking so bad he could barely use the computer. His fear was practically screaming. He pulls up 3 addresses in the Port District, trying to play them off as temporary storage. But Dante takes one look and his jaw tightens. He knows damn well those are family homes. All Gerald can do is admit he majorly screwed up. Dante confirms 23 illegal shipments went through his system. He then tells Lila to whip out her phone and record every last detail on that screen. While Layla's phone is getting all the evidence, a pale Gerald stammers out a question about his future. Dante gives him 2 horrible options: rat out every single accomplice, then quit and disappear off the face of the earth. The second choice, Dante explains, is being gift-wrapped for Victor Raines, which is basically a guaranteed death sentence. He was totally using Raines's psycho reputation to get what he wanted. Gerald went from white to ghost. Gerald whispers he's afraid he'll be murdered, and Dante confirms it like he's giving a weather report. He spells it out. Resigning is the only way to stay alive, and the deadline is tomorrow morning. As soon as Layla got the proof, they were out. In the dead silence of the car, Layla finally asks about this Victor Raines guy. Dante describes him not as a man, but as a problem, a tool that got too big for its britches and turned on him, his voice totally empty. Dante keeps going, painting Raines as a complete idiot who thought he could piggyback his dirty business onto Dante's operation and get away with it. When Layla guesses it's drugs, Dante says it could be way worse: weapons, or even trafficking people, adding that Victor's only real skill is making money. The leather on the steering wheel groaned under Dante's grip. He laid out the real issue. If the cops find that cargo, it's Dante's head on the chopping block. The idea of calling the police gets a sharp, disgusted no from Dante. His logic was pure narcissism. Nobody holds him accountable but him. He talks about owner's liability, the legal BS Victor is using for cover. If Victor gets caught, he'd make sure Dante went down right alongside him. Layla's question about their next move was her officially accepting his insane world. Dante's response was a promise to strike first, and strike fatally. Dante's quiet question, how, was the exact moment Miss Bennet went from being on the sidelines to being on the team. Back in the office, after 11, Dante poured himself a whiskey, a smooth, practiced move to keep himself calm. He offered a glass to Layla. She passed. He didn't push, just waved for her to throw the data she copied onto the main screen. The breakdown began, the addresses from her phone glowing like targets as Dante stared. Dante instantly saw the setup. The port locations were distribution hubs, where they'd break down huge shipments for street-level deals. The houses, he figured, were cover, using neighbors who were too damn scared to say anything. He tried to draw a line, telling her he'd handle things from here and she should stay out of it. Layla's immediate no was the first crack in his absolute authority. Dante dialed up the intensity, describing Victor Reigns as a monster who was smart, methodical, and loved to cause pain, a classic scare tactic to get her to back down. He claimed he had guys for this kind of work, basically treating her like a rookie. His smile wasn't a mask anymore. It was a glimpse of the predator underneath, and it was genuinely terrifying. He challenged her, asking if she had the stomach for the kind of ugly violence that was coming. Dante started a cold, detached psych eval, questioning if Lila could survive in a world where violence was the main form of communication. He talked about how all the moral lines get blurry in their business. A wave of realization hit Layla. She asked for details. He defined her role as analysis only, not field work, then ordered her to stand down. Her quiet question about his real motives got an answer that was dripping with creepy promises. Layla's response was a silent declaration of war between her conscience and his command. He told her his methods were his problem. Her job, he declared, was over. She was officially clean and cut loose. Then he set a trap, an ultimatum about the cops, just to test her. For 2 months, she'd seen his perfect manipulations and knew this order was really a warning to protect herself from the storm. She swore she wouldn't call anyone. He repeated the order. She agreed, lying through her teeth. She went to an apartment, changed into stealth gear, and drove to the address. A place that looked exactly like she'd pictured. The building was a 4-story skeleton covered in scars from old fights. She found a spot and started her stakeout. An hour of total silence was broken when a van pulled up. 2 guys got out, moving with a practiced rhythm as they carried several mid-sized containers into the building's ruined entrance. Layla's camera captured the whole thing, getting clear shots of their faces and the van's license plate. After 20 minutes, the van drove off and the street went back to being dead quiet. Layla hit a major fork at the road, weighing the smart move of reporting what she had against the insane risk of continuing her solo mission. The logical choice was clear. She chose the other one. The building's side entrance was blocked, but the front door was barely hanging on. Inside, the air was thick with the stench of decay and squatters. She took the stairs, ignoring the dead elevator. On the second floor, the muffled sounds of people behind doors gave a false sense of normalcy. She climbed to the 3rd floor, a dead zone that stank of mildew and rot. She moved like a ghost, making no sound. A brand new high-tech security lock made apartment 3F stick out like a sore thumb. She pressed her ear against the door but heard nothing but a crushing silence. Just as she started to back away, the door swung open, revealing a huge man whose face was a roadmap of a violent past. His eyes narrowed, instantly pegging her as an intruder. Layla tried a BS story about looking for a friend named Sarah. He shot down her lie, his voice a low growl, saying no one with that name lived there. As the goon moved forward, every instinct in Layla's body screamed at her to bolt. A second younger guy appeared, blocking her escape and pulling out a knife with a smooth, terrifying motion. He asked her a question she didn't even hear. Her attempts to talk her way out were useless. The first guy's hand locked onto her arm like a steel trap. He ordered her inside. She fought back but was overpowered until her arm went completely numb. Beaten, she was shoved into the dark pit of apartment 3F, her silent scream lost in the shadows. The apartment was just a gutted room, stacked high with the boxes from the van. Her main captor started the interrogation, demanding to know who she worked for. Her repeated denials earned her a stunning blow to the head that sent the room spinning. Her phone flew across the concrete floor and was snatched up by the younger guy, who quickly found the pictures. The question was asked again. Her mind raced through 1,000 dead ends. Knowing the truth that she was working alone, was a story they would never believe. Knowing that saying she was a cop would be a death sentence, she played her last card, Dante Morelli. The name hung in the tense air, a magic word that stopped them both in their tracks. The interrogator made her confirm it. She did, spinning a lie about a routine check-in, a desperate gamble to stay alive. After a tense, silent conversation between them, the leader made a phone call, his words sharp and to the point. Someone from Morelli's crew with pictures claims he knows she's here. He ended the call, telling Lila she was now officially a hostage. Her begging to be let go was met with a wall of silence. He shoved her into a chair, making it clear that the only thing of value she had, the only reason she was still breathing, was her connection to her boss. For 20 minutes, she sat there with them watching her. Then a third person arrived, a man whose ice-cold professional vibe made the other two look like amateurs. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with a creepy, calm face that showed zero emotion. The man's suit screamed quiet money. This had to be Victor Rains. Victor's voice, smooth and well-spoken, was completely wrong for this filthy room. He called her a minor annoyance. She made a desperate plea for her freedom, a suggestion he brushed aside like it was a joke. In his mind, she was either a piece to be used or a problem to be erased. He just had to figure out which. Lila tried to make herself seem small, like just another worker bee. Victor laughed at her attempt, saying that Dante Morelli only collects useful things. He demanded to know what made her so useful. A cold sweat covered her skin as she admitted her specialty was data analysis. Victor realized she was the one who had sniffed out his dirty Apex advisory deals, a discovery she knew had put her on Dante's radar. He then asked what Dante's mood was like. Hearing he was furious, Victor saw his rival's attempt to go legit as a pathetic weakness. A small smile appeared on Victor's face, which was 1,000 times scarier than his blank expression. So this guy Victor corners Lila and starts spinning his version of their history. He claims he was the secret MVP who saved Dante's failing business and built their entire kingdom, all for a promised 50-50 split of the power. Lila knew right away that deal got torched. Victor sneers that it was Dante's dumb idea to go legit that blew everything up. A weak move to ignore the blood money funding their whole operation. Layla's face stayed a total blank canvas. She hits him with a simple question. What do you want? His goal, he says, is to absolutely demolish Dante's new, respectable image, exposing him as a total hypocrite whose empire is built on bodies and secrets, even name-dropping casualties like Marco Morelli. After dropping those bombshells, Victor's whole vibe shifts. You're not going anywhere, by the way. A cold, primal fear just gripped her. She shot back that her death would lead straight to him. Victor just laughed, pointing out the massive gap between what Dante suspects and what he can actually prove. He bragged his plan would be a wrap long before Dante could ever connect the dots. Victor then gives the order to have her locked up, adding with a sick twist, make her comfortable. The original goon grabs her arm again. All the fight was gone from her as they hauled her to a tiny, dark room with just a grimy mattress and a bucket. The lock slammed shut, plunging her into pure blackness. Her legs gave out, and she just collapsed, trying to piece her shattered reality back together. Layla was basically a ghost, buried alive and totally cut off. Her location was a complete mystery. Dante, in a fatal screw-up, thought she was safe, while the puppet master, Victor Rains, figured he'd just eliminate her once she was no longer useful. Her thoughts turned toxic, blaming her own guts for getting her into this mess. A classic trauma response. Her hands started desperately searching the cell, a blind hunt for an exit that wasn't there. The cell was a perfect trap. Sheer walls, an outside lock, and a sealed window. A bucket was her only roommate. A second search of the dark confirmed it. Just her and the mattress. She fought down a tidal wave of panic, forcing her breathing into slow, even counts. Victor's mention of a shipment was the only sliver of hope she had. A single event that might create a crack in her cage, one chance to flip her fate. Time became a meaningless soup in the darkness. Then sounds, muffled talking, footsteps, crates dragging, right before the loud click of the lock. Light exploded into the room, a painful shock. A figure stood in the doorway, his voice a low command. "It's time." Lila got to her feet, squinting into the blinding light past the guard.
Her welcoming committee had grown to 5, maybe 6 guys. Every single one of them was looking at her with cold, professional eyes, like they were sizing up a target for removal. Her question of where got a short, sharp reply. "The waterfront. Victor wants this handled cleanly." That same rough grip was back on her arm, pulling her into the main room. The place had been wiped clean, no furniture, no crates. It was now just an empty, sterile stage. They shoved her out into the frigid night, the air thick with salt, garbage, and the river. A car was already waiting. It was a black sedan with blacked-out windows. The rear door swung open, and out stepped Dante. His gaze swept over Lila, her captor, and landed on Victor Rains, who was watching from the building's entrance with a smug look of victory. "Release her," Dante said, his voice low and full of threat. "I don't think so." Victor strolled forward. "You get it, right? She has value now. She's evidence you were spying on me, evidence you broke our agreement." "We have no agreement. Not for 3 years. We have a principle. My world is separate from yours." And she trespassed. "She is not one of my people." "She's your asset, your problem," Victor shot back, his smile turning predatory. "So here's the deal. You walk away. You stop looking into Meridian, you stop digging around my business, and she'll be fine. It is that simple." Dante's face was unreadable, but his body tensed up. "If you harm her, no place on this planet will hide you." Big threat from a man outnumbered 6-1. "Do you think I came unprepared?" A crack appeared in Victor's confidence. He glanced past Dante, searching the shadows for enemies he couldn't see, and in that split second, the whole scene exploded. The first sound wasn't a gunshot, but a sharp crack, the sound of a sniper taking the shot. The man holding Lila just crumpled like his strings were cut and hit the pavement. Her instinct didn't tell her to run away, but to run to Dante, the only solid thing in her collapsing world. He pulled her in, and a pistol just materialized in his hand, shattering the image she had of him. The quiet professional was now a human shield against a hailstorm of bullets, a contradiction that messed with her head. Victor's men scattered for cover as the street turned into a slaughterhouse, nothing like you see in the movies. The air ripped apart with gunfire, the thud of bullets hitting metal, and the high-pitched scream of shattering glass. "Stay down," Dante ordered, his voice an island of pure calm in the storm. Layla flattened herself behind the sedan, trying to shrink away from the chaos. Figures emerged from the darkness, smoothly flanking Victor's guys with practiced military precision. Victor had ducked behind a concrete pillar, his shouts lost in the noise of the battle. One of his crew tried to bolt and was instantly deleted by a hidden shooter. Another guy went down, his leg just disintegrating. Dante's gun barked twice, Short, sharp reports, and a scream was born and then silenced. The total silence that followed felt more violent than the noise, leaving just a ringing hum and the sharp smell of gunpowder. From where she was hiding, she saw Dante as a stone-cold statue of death. Gun at the ready, he scanned the area like a chess grandmaster after a game-winning move. 4 of Victor's team were down. 2 were completely still. 2 others were writhing in agony. The last pair had dropped their weapons. Victor was still hiding in the shadows. "Show yourself!" Dante's voice cut through the silence. "Or my men will drag you out. I promise you this is the better option." A tense moment passed. Then Victor stepped out, hands partly raised, his face a mask of forced calm. "An impressive show, Dante. It seems I misjudged your capacity for this kind of action." "A fatal misjudgment." Dante moved forward, his aim locked on. "Kneel." "I don't think—" "On your knees, Victor, or I will put you there." A nerve twitched in Victor's jaw, but he sank down, the expensive fabric of his suit meeting the filthy pavement. The mask finally broke, revealing the pure, raw hatred underneath. Dante stopped just out of his reach. "You made 3 mistakes tonight. First, you thought I was clueless about the cancer you were growing in my own house. Second, you assumed I didn't care. Third, you thought you could endanger someone under my protection and get away with it." "She was spying on my operation." The lie was smooth and cold. "I put her there. She was a diagnostic tool designed to see how far you'd gone and to authorize my response." Victor's eyes narrowed. "And what response is that?" "Yuck. That is 100% up to you." Dante nodded to one of his men, who pulled out zip ties. "You will give me a complete intel dump. Every site, every shipment, every name in your books. Then, you will burn this network to the ground and get out of this city." "You are delusional if you think—" Dante crouched, getting eye level with Victor. "Do you remember Marco?" A dead stillness fell over Victor. "My brother." Dante's voice was a low, venomous whisper. "Gone 5 years. The official story was a car accident. Brake failure, a tragedy." A long pause, filled with unspoken history. "Except it was no accident, was it, Victor?" "I don't know what you're—" "Do not." The word was like a razor. "I have spent 5 years proving what my soul already knew. You arranged Marco's death because he found the discrepancies in your accounts. You were afraid he would bring his proof to me. You gambled that my grief would make me blind." The blood drained from Victor's face. "Dante, you have to understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly. You wiped out my bloodline. You used my inheritance to build your own criminal empire. And tonight, you went after someone I have a responsibility for." Dante stood up to his full height. "So this is how it goes. You will cooperate completely. You will hand over every piece of information I need to tear down your organization. In return, I will give you just enough time to run before I leak your existence to the world." "And if I refuse?" Dante racked the slide on his pistol, the click of a round being chambered, screaming in the silence. "Then we skip all the steps in between, and I end this right now." Lila watched from the side, her heart pounding as the new reality clicked into place. Marco's end was an execution, a truth Dante had carried for half a decade. So Layla's entire picture of Dante Morelli just exploded and came back together, but this time it's in terrifying high def. Victor looks up at this new Dante, and you can practically hear something inside him snap. He's like, "Fine, you want info, I'll talk, but not here." Dante ain't having it. You'll talk exactly where I tell you to. He gives his crew a nod, and 2 guys haul Victor up, shoving him into a van that just pulled up. His busted-up crew gets loaded into another ride, while the 2 guys who surrendered are getting processed with zero emotion. Dante turns his focus back to Lila. You hurt? She just shakes her head, too stunned to speak. Can you walk? Yes. Good enough. Get in the car. Layla moves like a robot, sliding into the sedan. Dante gets in beside her while some rando takes the wheel, peeling away from the chaos like it was just a routine pickup, not a full-blown gunfight. After a few blocks, Layla finally asks, The facility, what is that? It's a clean spot for a chat. You're going to interrogate him. Or, that's the idea. Dante, if you hurt him. Getting hurt is a key part of this. Dante's eyes were pure stone. Victor is why Marco's dead. He's been bleeding my operation for months, and tonight he was here to kill you. So yeah, harm is the goal. You can either accept that or waste your breath with other ideas I'm just going to ignore. Layla's throat goes dry. Isn't there another way? The cops? The FBI? An organization that would put me under the same microscope as him? One that would dig up the foundations of everything I've ever built? An agency that would use this to wreck my entire world? Dante's voice was calm but sharp enough to cut glass. I told you before, Layla. The law doesn't protect guys like me. It hunts us. Victor knew it. That's why he got so cocky. Taking him in means I expose myself. But if you kill him, I never said kill, I said harm. There's a huge difference. That little detail didn't make Layla feel any better, but she clammed up. Arguing was pointless. She chose to walk into this world. She blew off Dante's direct order to stay away. Now all she could do was watch the fallout. The facility turned out to be a warehouse in a neighborhood that looked like it had been forgotten for 50 years. The inside was exactly what Layla pictured. Bare concrete, massive steel shelves, basic furniture, and lighting that made every shadow look like a monster. And there was Victor, strapped to a chair in the middle of the huge room. He looked small, like all his power had been stripped away, leaving just a man. Dante walked in, took off his coat, and rolled up his sleeves like he was about to get his hands dirty. One of his guys handed him a folder. This, Dante started, flipping it open, is everything I already have on your little side hustle. 23 illegal shipments through Meridian in 6 months. 3 distribution spots near the docks. Over $600,000 funneled through fake companies. What I'm missing is where you get your product, who you sell to, and how big your network really is. And you think I'm just going to tell you that? Victor's voice tried to be tough, but Layla could hear the fear shaking underneath. I'm absolutely sure you will, since the other option is a whole lot worse. Dante dragged a chair to face Victor. Here's my offer. You give me total cooperation, and I give you a 12-hour head start before I let certain other crews know you've been stepping in their turf. It's enough time for you to run, to disappear, start over somewhere new, but only after you give me everything. And the other option? In that case, I make sure every major player in the city finds out you've been skimming from their supply chains while using my name for protection. Your life expectancy drops to 48 hours, and I'll be slightly annoyed by the mess I have to clean up. Victor's face was a mess of emotions. Anger, calculation, pure terror, and finally, the slow sinking feeling of being totally screwed. You're bluffing. Am I? Dante leaned back. You've watched me, Victor. You know I don't make promises I can't keep. So make your choice. Help me clean this up nice and tidy, or die knowing the only thing you ever accomplished was being a pain in my neck for a few months. The silence in the warehouse was suffocating. Standing by the door, Lila felt like she'd stepped into some dark, twisted universe with rules she couldn't understand or handle. Finally, Victor broke. The source is in Newark. It came in on container ships listed as textiles and machine parts. My guy there would pull the containers I wanted before customs saw them, and I'd handle transport to Meridian. Give me the contact, Dante ordered. Victor coughed up a name that meant nothing to Layla, but Dante wrote it down. Your clients? Mostly street-level dealers, guys who fly under the radar of the big syndicates. I kept the deals small and steady, hard to trace. How many? 30, maybe 40. Keeping a full list was too much of a risk. Dante's face was a blank slate. Lies. A guy as meticulous as you would never work without ledgers. Tell me where the data is. Victor hesitated. It's digital, encrypted on a remote server. Pull it up. An associate brought over a laptop. Victor, with his hands still tied, awkwardly typed in a web address and a password. A crazy-looking encrypted file system popped up on the screen, a perfect map of his whole crooked operation. Dante's eyes scanned everything. Is this all of it? Every important piece. Good enough. With a quick nod, the data was copied to a secure drive. What happened next? That was everything I was doing inside your organization. Talk about Marco. The color drained from Victor's face. Whose hands were on that car? Who cut the brake lines? Dante. That was 5 years ago. Answer the question. Victor squeezed his eyes shut. A mechanic. Torres. He owed me. I wiped his debt for one job. He didn't know who the target was. He just followed my orders. Where is he now? Dead. Fatal overdose 2 years ago. I had nothing to do with that. A heavy silence fell over the room. Did Marco feel any pain? What? When the brakes failed, in those last few seconds, he knew he was helpless. Was it slow or was it instant? Victor's answer was so quiet it was almost a whisper. I don't know. Dante stood up, paced for a second, then spun around and threw a single, brutal punch that sent the chair and Victor crashing to the ground. Victor slammed into the concrete floor. Layla jumped. Dante stood over him, his breathing heavy, the knuckles on his hand probably shattered. That's for Marco. For the 5 years I spent blaming myself. For taking out the only family member who didn't want to see me fail. A trickle of blood ran from Victor's mouth as his eyes went blank. I'm sorry, he whispered. No, you're sorry you got caught. Dante pulled himself together, wincing as he flexed his busted hand. Get him out of my sight, drive him to the state line and dump him. If I ever see him in this city again, his life is over. 2 guys picked Victor up, carrying him to the door. He was just a dead weight, not fighting back at all, just an object being moved. After they left, Dante slumped into the empty chair, burying his face in his hands. Layla carefully walked closer to him. Is your hand broken? I think so. It needs a doctor. Later. He looked up at her, and for the first time, she saw just how deeply, truly exhausted he was. He was completely and totally drained. You had no business being there. I know. You could have been killed. I know. So why did you do it? Layla took the chair opposite him. Because you are going to handle this alone, and I don't know what I thought, that you might need backup, that I could be useful. You were useful. You found the patterns, you tracked the money, and you gave me the leverage I needed, but being there almost cost you everything. I'm sorry. Don't be, just... He paused, trying to find the right words. Never do it again. I won't. A minute of silence hung between them. Then Layla asked the question that had been hovering over this whole nightmare. Your brother, Marco, what was he like? A flash of something like grief twisted Dante's face before he got it under control. He was smart. Too smart for this business, but too loyal to leave it. He was always pushing me to go legit, to turn our father's empire into something that wouldn't get us all killed or thrown in prison. I told him he was a fool. But you did it in the end. Only after he died. Or after Victor had him killed. Right. Because Marco was right. The syndicate my father built was poison to everyone it touched. Enemies, allies, and family. It was only a matter of time before that life poisoned me too. Dante stood, holding his injured hand, so I began making moves. Quietly, carefully. I cut out the worst rot, started legitimate businesses. It took 3 years to build an operation that people didn't see as totally crooked. And now Victor wants to drag me right back into that mess. Victor never wanted me to leave. He loved the old ways, the violence, the fear, the power. When I cut him off, he took it as the ultimate betrayal. Dante moved to the door. Let's move. We have to get out in front of this before they find those warehouses and start asking questions. The drive back into town was a quiet, high-stakes game of chicken. The sunrise, a mix of pink and gray, felt like a slap in the face after the night's bloodbath. Layla could feel the telltale signs of serious trauma, a deep ache from the constant stress and the gruesome scenes flashing in her mind. Back at their HQ, Dante launched into immediate damage control to contain the mess. His actions were surgically precise, calls to port security, alerts to property managers about a break-in, and legal teams sent to position his company as the victim of a massive internal scam. By noon, he'd constructed a flawless, completely false story. The official story claimed a rogue agent at Meridian ran an off-the-books operation without the company knowing. The people responsible were dealt with internally, keeping cops out of it. Morelli Enterprises promised to cooperate fully, pointing to its brand new security upgrades. The narrative was bulletproof, clean, and a total lie, but it was designed to hold up, backed by the 3 years Dante had spent crafting his clean public image. You're disturbingly good at this, Layla said as he hung up a call. At what? He shot back. At erasing the past after it happens, creating a story where you were never part of it. I wasn't part of it. Victor used my company without my knowledge. That's the truth. But you had a feeling this could happen for 2 months. I had a hunch. I didn't have proof until you brought it to me. Dante leaned back in his chair. That's the difference between being a partner in crime and being a victim. Victims get sympathy, the guilty get investigated. And which are you? A victim? Dante held her gaze for a long, heavy second. I'm a man building a legit company on the ruins of a crooked one. This means I decide which facts see the light of day and which get buried. You don't have to agree, but you have to understand it to work here. And if I can't, then you're done here, and we go our separate ways. Layla weighed his threat against the last 12 hours of her life. The raw violence, the cold mind games, and the flawless way Dante set up Victor's fall while making himself look completely innocent. His calculated amorality should have sent her running straight to the feds. But it didn't. Underneath all the monstrous actions, she saw a twisted kind of justice. A guy getting revenge for his brother, taking huge risks to save his company and his people. He pulled her out of a death trap. A totally insane move when leaving her to die would have been the smarter play. "I'll stay," she finally said. Dante gave a small nod, like he was just confirming something he already knew. "Good. We have a hell of a lot of work to do." The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in erasing Victor's entire operation. Distribution centers were quietly cleared out and shut down. The Newark shipments got intercepted, their illegal cargo handed over to the cops. Victor's buyers got quiet warnings that the network was burned, telling them to find new suppliers. Dante managed everything with his trademark scary precision, controlling the info, giving out orders, and killing every potential problem before it could even breathe. Watching him operate, Lila started to see the real shape of his power. It wasn't just built on fear, though that was definitely a big part of it. It was built on a hardcore pragmatism, on the idea that any problem could be solved with the right kind of pressure. It was about knowing exactly when to reach for a gun and when to reach for a contract. At the same time, she felt a shift inside herself. The instinct that made her a whistleblower at her old job hadn't disappeared. It was just being redirected. Instead of reporting crimes to the cops, she was now helping to bury them inside a secret internal system. The fact she wasn't having a moral crisis was a weird new development. 3 weeks after the incident, Dante called her to his office. It was late, past 9 at night, and the building was dead quiet. A bottle of whiskey was on his desk with 2 glasses. "Want one?" he asked. "I've told you what I drink. Consider it a celebration. We're in the clear. The cops have closed their investigation into Meridian. Victor hasn't been seen since they let him go. And for the first time in a long time, we're making a profit, not just losing cash to ghost consultants." Layla sat down, taking the glass he offered. "Where do you think he is?" "Victor, I'd bet on South America, a place where extradition is a joke and property is cheap. He'll probably set up shop again, just not in our backyard. But what if he comes back? He won't." Dante downed some of the whiskey. "He knows that showing his face again would force my hand. And next time, there won't be a warning." A heavy silence filled the room. Then out of the blue, Dante said, "Thank you." Layla looked up at him. "For what?" "For finding the problem. For having the guts to ignore my order to stop. For," he paused, choosing his words with care, "not running when you figured out what this company really is." "The idea of running definitely crossed my mind more than once. But you didn't. That's the part that matters." He refilled their glasses and went on. "What I said before is still true. Being useful is what keeps you here. But you're more than just useful now, Ms. Bennett. You're a cornerstone." A warmth spread across Layla's neck, a physical reaction she couldn't hide. "I'm just doing my job. You're going way beyond it. You're helping me build something that lasts, the kind of legacy Marco would have wanted." The hardness in Dante's face softened. "He would have liked your brain. Your refusal to give up on a hard problem. I wish I'd had the chance to meet him. Me too." Dante got up, walking to the window to look at the city lights. "For 5 years, my life was nothing but pure anger. Aimed at Victor, at myself, at a world that would take Marco, the only good thing in our family. That rage made me very careful. It pushed me out of the life that got him killed. But it also froze me solid. I chased away anyone who got too near because getting close is a strategic liability. He turned from the window, his eyes locking with hers. You somehow managed to get through that armor. Layla's own pulse kicked up. What are you saying? I'm saying that somewhere between you breaking my base and you almost getting killed for my company, your safety became a priority, and that makes things complicated. A complication? Layla repeated. I'm your boss. You work for me. There's a power difference that makes anything more than that seriously unethical, maybe even predatory. But he paused as if thinking about his next words. Even with that, I can't stop thinking about you. I find myself wondering what you think about things totally unrelated to this job. I want to know you in ways that have nothing to do with how good you are with financial reports. Layla put her glass down, her hand shaking. Dante, you don't need to say this. This isn't a move. It's a statement of fact. And considering what we've been through, you deserve the truth. She stood up, walked around the massive desk, and stopped a few feet from him, close enough to make out the faint, silver line of a scar by his eyebrow, close enough to smell the whiskey and the sharp, expensive scent that was just him. I've been thinking about you too, she admitted, her voice low, in ways that are completely separate from my job. This is terrifying, given who you are, who I am, and the fact that this is probably the single worst idea we've ever had. Probably, Dante agreed, but I don't want to let the thought go. Neither do I. For a long second, they just stood there, the space between them buzzing with unspoken promises. Then slowly, giving her more than enough time to back away, he lifted his good hand to her face. His thumb brushed her cheek, a soft move totally clashing with his hard-as-nails reputation. Tell me to stop, he breathed. Nope. His kiss was a question, like he couldn't believe this was real, that she wasn't about to ghost. When she kissed back, the whole vibe flipped, turning into something that felt like destiny. They broke apart, gasping for air, foreheads touching. This changes everything, he said. I know. People will talk. They'll say you used this to get ahead, that I'm abusing my power. Let them talk. Oh, Layla, I couldn't care less what they think. She leaned back to lock eyes with him. This is what matters. You, whatever is sparking between us, everything else is just static. For the first time, Dante's smile actually reached his eyes. You're totally going to be my ruin. Probably, she shot back, using his own word. But it's going to be one hell of a show. For 3 months, they kept their thing a complete secret, a miracle in an office that ran on drama. But Claire, the receptionist, figured it out in 2 weeks. Layla saw it in how Claire went from professional to just silently judging, though reading Claire was like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube. The whispers eventually started. Peeps would stare whenever Dante called her into his office, totally curious about her new level of influence. Layla tried to play it cool and professional, but it was a lost cause. So the office rumor is you slept your way to a promotion, Dante noted one night at his place, their private sanctuary. Is that theory wrong? Layla fired back from the couch, deep in a report while rocking his shirt, a major power move. Logically, no. Chronologically, yeah. You were already indispensable way before this thing started. Thing! Layla pushed, wanting a better word. Is that what we're calling it? Dante stopped what he was doing. What would you call it? Something less temporary. Something that admits this is real. He shut his laptop and slid next to her. It is real. I just don't have the right words for it yet. Relationship. That works. Good. Layla went back to her papers, but he gently took them from her. There's something else we need to talk about, he said. That line never leads to good news. It's not bad, just complicated. The way he chose his words cranked up the tension. There's loose end from the Victor situation, a problem that's gonna blow up if we ignore it. A knot of pure dread formed in Layla's gut. What problem? His clients, the buyer list from his server, most were small time, but a few are tied to major crime syndicates, and those syndicates are now asking why their supply chain got wrecked. Can't you just Nui and tell them Victor is out of business and they need to find a new guy? That message went out 3 weeks ago. Most got the hint, but 2 crews are still digging into Victor's sudden vanishing act. One of them has ties to my father's old world. Layla went completely still. What does that mean? It means they know enough about my past to be suspicious, to wonder if I've gone back to my old gig. Dante got up and paced to the window. I have a meeting tomorrow night, neutral ground. It's supposed to be a chat, but these chats always come with demands. What kind of demands? Either I take over as their new supplier, or I give them a damn good reason why I won't. And if they don't like your reason, they'll assume I took out Victor to steal his business. Then they'll either offer me a partnership or try to take me out as competition. Layla's voice was shaking with fear. You can't go alone. I won't. Marcus and Leo are coming with me. He faced her. I'm telling you this because things could get messy. If something goes down, you need to know the company's emergency plan. Nothing is going to happen. Probably not, but I don't bet on probably anymore. He sat back down, the tension so thick you could cut it. Company protocol? If I'm taken out, power transfers to a pre-picked board. You were added last week. Claire has the paperwork. Her reply was a barely audible, Dante. This isn't for drama, it's just planning ahead. There's a difference. His hand covered hers. You helped build this company just as much as I did. You've earned the right to run it if I get taken off the board. You won't be. That's the plan. But plans aren't guarantees. She fought the urge to call him paranoid, knowing that in his world, this was just next-level risk management. I get it, she said. But when you get back tomorrow, we're changing the subject. We'll talk about something normal, like what's for dinner or how ugly these walls are. A faint smile appeared on Dante's face. Deal. The next night, Layla haunted his apartment, unable to focus on work. The meeting was at 9. It was now 10:30, and her 2 texts were still unread. At 11, she caved and called Marcus, his head of security. He's functional, Marcus said, straight to the point. Meeting's running long. He'll call when it's over. Define functional. Alive, not hurt, and in the middle of some tough talks. The other side is stalling. How tough? The kind that needs a cool head, not a firefight. Don't worry, Miss Bennett. You'd be the first to know if things went south. Layla hung up, clinging to Marcus's calm vibe. She paced for another 40 minutes before her phone finally lit up. I'm on my way, Dante said. It's resolved. What does resolved mean? It means I persuaded them I'm not and never will be in their line of work. They weren't happy but agreed to the terms. That's it? They just agreed?
I might have offered a cash apology for the inconvenience Victor caused, while making it crystal clear that any more interest in me would be very bad for their health.
God, Dante. It's over, Layla. That's all that matters.
The city noise crackled over the line.
I'll be there in 20 minutes. Then we can have that boring conversation you wanted.
He was there in 18, looking wiped out but completely fine.
Layla's hug broke all their unwritten rules, a fierce blast of relief. I'm perfectly fine, he whispered into her hair. I know, Marcus told me. Didn't make the waiting any easier. You'll have to get used to it.
This is part of being with me. Layla pulled back a little. Being with you? Is that what we're calling it now?
Got a better idea. No, that one's perfect.
Her kiss was a shaky truce, a taste of old whiskey and something else she couldn't name. You owe me a normal conversation, she demanded. No more plans tonight, no more hidden threats, just us. They ordered food that got cold on the table. A movie played that neither of them watched. They passed out on the sofa, tangled up in a way that would definitely hurt later, but felt right at the moment. For one night, Dante Morelli wasn't some ex-syndicate boss building a legit empire. He was just a guy, laughing at the wrong time, feeling how cold Layla's feet were, and holding her like she was a priceless, fragile thing he had to protect. It was the most normal night Layla had experienced in months, a tiny glimmer of hope for what they could be. The real test of their new life slammed into them 6 weeks later when the FBI showed up at Morelli Enterprises asking about Meridian Holdings. Layla was at her desk when 2 agents radiating authority walked past Claire toward Dante's office. She stood up to stop them, but his door was already swinging open. "Gentlemen," Dante's voice was a perfect mask of cooperation, the sound of a man who saw this coming a mile away.
"Please come in, Ms. Bennett. Hold all my calls."
The door clicked shut. Layla dropped back into her chair, heart hammering against her ribs as she pretended to work. The story they cooked up was airtight. She knew every single detail because she'd helped write the script. But having that alibi ripped apart by federal agents was a whole different level of stress. After 45 minutes, the feds bounced, looking ticked off but with nothing to go on. A second later, Dante just appears in his doorway. "My office," is all he says. Layla grabs her tablet and follows. He locks the door, and the mood gets heavy as he sits. "They know about Victor," he drops.
"How much?"
"That he ran a shadow op through Meridian, then ghosted the exact moment we flagged a misuse of our funds. Their whole game is to figure out if I helped him disappear or if I was just another sucker he ripped off." "What did you tell them?" "The stone-cold truth. My assistant found some funky numbers. Our own audit showed Gerald Renton was running a black ops business on the side. We canned Renton and filed our report. Victor Rains was Renton's outside guy who vanished before we could talk to him." "Did they buy it?" "They're not convinced, but suspicion isn't proof, and our master plan left them with 0 evidence to grab onto." Dante stared at her. "They're gonna want to talk to you, probably tomorrow. They'll ask what you found, the timeline, and if you saw anything that tipped you off that I knew." Layla's throat went bone dry. "What do I say?" "The truth. You found problems during a routine check. You brought them straight to me. I started a deep dive and fired the guys responsible. Don't give them opinions. Don't guess about anything, and don't you dare try to cover for me. Just state the facts as they happened."
including the part where I went into that building after you told me not to. Especially that part. It proves you were acting on your own, which blows up any theory that we were in on this together. His strategy was classic Dante, all ice in his veins logic, but it was totally messing with her head. When she started questioning the ethics of it all, he just switched gears. He ordered her to take any immunity deal they offered for testimony against him, framing it as a clinical move to keep her safe from the blowback of his world, basically shutting down her ability to choose. His order was a total power play. In a last-ditch effort, she dropped the L-bomb, a confession squeezed out of her under insane pressure. The dude, Dante, just brushed her feelings aside, calling it a terrible reason to lie under oath. She made it clear she'd tell the truth, but also that she was ride or die for him. A classic sign of a trauma bond. Lila even tried to tell him he didn't have to feel the same way. She told him his isolation was her problem now too. And that got a reaction. He kissed her hard, a mix of pure desperation and relief. He said he loved her back, but added one condition. Her survival had to come before her loyalty. Her comeback was that her choice would depend on the situation. He met that defiance with a smile, a silent nod to her unbreakable spirit. The Fed interrogation of Lila kicked off the next day in a room designed to mess with her head. The subject gave them a super clean story, conveniently leaving out the part where she was abducted and interrogated off the books. These omissions were a pro move to keep her credible by not dropping wild, unprovable claims that would make her look like she was in on the whole thing. The agents wrote it all down like emotionless robots. Their last play was to ask about her and Dante, a classic tactic to find a motive. She confirmed they were together, but said it started 3 months ago, way after the internal investigation wrapped up. My job title was his assistant. We were always working closely because of our roles, she stated. When they asked if their relationship clouded her professional judgment, she shut that down hard, insisting that the company rules were all she ever followed. After the interview, Layla felt like she'd just survived some kind of surgery with a 50-50 shot. She later gave Dante the play-by-play on how the agents grilled her about their relationship. She carefully went over her story, confirming she stuck to the script they'd laid out. When she asked him how she did, he just pointed out that their relationship gives the feds a motive to doubt her story. Dante then said that without proof they were linked before, the feds' theory was just hot air. 2 weeks later, the investigation was officially shut down, citing no grounds for a case, though a letter did suggest they tighten up their internal security. You could only call this a win in the loosest sense, because the fallout was insane. The board was gutted by resignations and key clients bailed, showing a total loss of faith. Their public subsidiaries saw stock prices tank by 12%. Dante looked over the damage reports like it was just another Tuesday, predicting a comeback built on pure, raw power. When Lila asked for a timeline, he figured 6 months to 1 year. His first move was to launch a relentless PR blitz to look legit again. Staring at the grim numbers, Lila pitched the idea of a charity, a foundation. Dante laughed it off at first, but then he saw how a move like that could totally scrub their public image. Lila brought him back to reality, saying its real purpose was to give a guy named Marco a real legacy, not just to slap a bandage on their reputation. Dante agreed, remembering Marco was all about building the family's future, not burning it down. And out of that talk, the Marco Morelli Foundation was born, its mission to dish out scholarships to the city's underprivileged kids. It was a total PR masterstroke, slowly changing how the public saw Dante and his entire operation.
The pressure was a massive weight, but inside that crazy stress cooker, a huge internal shift started to happen. That paranoid, always watching look in Dante's eyes started to fade, replaced by weird things like a random smile. He made them take an entire weekend with zero work talk allowed. In a private spot, he laid out his new reality. He was no longer just waiting for the next disaster to strike. For the first time ever, he talked about a future that didn't have to end in flames. Lila looked right at him, confirming their fragile peace and the Foundation's win. Dante's quiet agreement was him giving in to a new kind of peace. 6 months after the investigation ended, at the Foundation's first big event, 20 scholarships were handed out. Dante stood in front of everyone and spoke about his brother with a raw, completely honest vibe. He talked about how Marco believed in second chances. From the back of the room, Layla watched, a storm of pride and the massive relief of just being alive swirling inside her. After the speeches, a young scholarship winner came up to Dante to say thanks. He waved it off, saying the scholarship was just a key. She had to be the one to open the door. And then he added a rule that one day she had to do the same for someone else. That whole exchange seemed to fix something inside him. He muttered that Marco would have loved this, and all Layla could do was agree. They watched the quiet event, a moment that made it perfectly clear what an insane and terrifying journey they'd been on. Their bond, built in a war zone, had morphed into a shaky truce. The cracks were still there, nasty fights over control and moves he'd made without her. The ghosts of his past were a constant weight on the fragile future they were trying to build. But the fact that neither of them would ever give up was a silent promise of what could be. A year later, Dante popped the question. It wasn't some romantic moment, but a business deal he laid out in the cold office air after a hellish meeting. Layla just laughed at how ridiculously clinical he was. He stayed dead serious, his eyes locked on her as he talked about a life with her. Something real, beyond all the violence and spreadsheets. Something that's just ours, Dante finished. She snapped her laptop shut and moved to invade his personal space, plopping right onto his lap, a welcome chaos in his orderly world that made him smile. Yes, she said. Yes, he repeated, needing to hear it again. Yes, I will marry you, even though your proposal was clumsy as hell and you're completely incapable of turning off your business brain. And those are fair points. I'm marrying you anyway. 6 months after that, they got married in a low-key ceremony at the Foundation with just a few people there. Claire was there, her face a perfect poker mask that almost looked like approval. So get this. Dante actually started changing. One of his old school guys noticed he was trying to talk things out before just breaking kneecaps. Meanwhile, Lila's folks were absolutely losing their minds that their daughter was with a guy the feds were watching. Their relationship was a masterclass in controlled chaos, but they found a rhythm that just worked. The next few years were a straight-up battle to drag a mob empire into the legitimate world, with ghosts from the past and the law breathing down their necks. But check it. They were scoring wins. Their foundation totally blew up, becoming a lifeline for countless students. The business pushed into new markets, building alliances on respect instead of fear. Dante's public image slowly morphed from crime lord to some kind of poster boy for redemption. After 2 years, Lila gets named COO, and her skills were so sharp she shut down anyone whispering she got the job through him. She rebuilt the company from the ground up, making it transparent and tough, and became the hero of their war against old patterns of violence. They bought a house, carving out a sanctuary where they could be a team, but also just themselves. They got a dog,
And Dante put on this big show of being annoyed, but was instantly obsessed with it. Their whole bond was forged in the fire of arguments and compromises. 5 years after they first met, Lila was standing in front of the Foundation's new HQ, a sick, renovated building in a gentrified part of town. She ran her hand over a wall of case files, a whole gallery of faces whose lives they'd completely flipped. Dante rolled up beside her, his voice low. "We built this." Lila had to admit, this life was nothing like she'd planned, but it was 1,000,000 times better. He reached out, confessing he never thought a monster like him could ever escape the darkness. He told her she was the one who showed him the way, but Lila corrected him, saying they did it together, that he had to want to change first. He agreed, though, that her believing in him was the final push he needed. Lila wondered out loud what the most important part of their journey was. Answering her own question, she decided it was the grind itself, the constant work and rebuilding a state she called real, which was way better than perfect. Dante just shut her up with a deep, slow kiss, a crazy public display of affection right there in the monument to their new life. When they broke apart, Lila spotted a nervous kid by the door, reminding her of her old self. He was there for an interview. She just smiled and waved him inside. Later that night, in the quiet of their home, Dante dropped a line she'd never heard from him before. "I'm happy." In the dim light, Lila scanned his face, checking if he was for real. He explained that for the first time ever, he wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. She told him he'd earned that peace, and so had she. Then she listed off all his little habits that drove her crazy, and he owned up to every single one. He then called her out on her own obsession with control, a point she couldn't even argue with. When he asked what she'd been digging into lately, she fessed up to snooping on him a little, and he just laughed it off. They fell asleep tangled up in the safe haven they'd created, a whole new life built on the wreckage of their past. This wasn't some fairy tale. There was no guarantee of smooth sailing ahead. More storms were definitely coming, but they had each other and a foundation that was rewriting people's futures, all built on something way stronger than fear. They were living proof that people could actually change, that a real connection could be born from the absolute worst circumstances, and that a single person could be both a savage and a savior. And in the end, that was enough. For them, that was everything.